Hi, it's Pastor Andy, and today is the fourth of our daily videos this week where I'm trying to clarify a simple word, I. Now, if you've watched the other three videos, just bear with me for just a second. If you haven't, let me encourage you to pause this video right now and to go back and watch the first three videos in this week. Otherwise, this video will make less sense. You're going to get the answer, that's the good thing, or at least my answer, but you're going to miss all the context for it. So, I encourage you to stop this, go back. The title for this video is the same as the previous three, only this is part 4, the others are part 1, part 2, and part 3. So, in this video, I want to give you my answer for how Paul is using the word I in Romans 7. Please understand, this is my answer. This is not necessarily the answer. Many conservative Bible scholars have a lot of different opinions on this, and even when they agree in general, there's some specifics that they might have disagreement upon. How the I is interpreted in this passage is not a matter of salvation. It just because one person says, I interpret it this way and you interpret it that way, it has no bearings on interpretation, on salvation. Therefore, we can't consider this heresy. However, as I've said in some of the other videos this week, how we interpret the I in verses 7 through 12 will carry forward to 13 through 25. And as we do carry it forward, it impacts how we understand Romans chapter 7. So, what I, Andy Brams, have tried to do this week is to present some challenges in understanding the word I. I've focused more on the positive aspects of each one, but a little bit of the challenges of each potential interpretation as well. My concern this week in even sharing these was to create, it was that I might create confusion, and I probably have along the way. And so this is what I offer. Please understand, if you're confused, I haven't said all that could be said about this, but I have encouraged you to watch all 4 videos. I've done that a few times now. But if you have questions, put something in the comments about this. Send the church an email, and we'll get back. We'll set up a time to talk one-on-one or whatever that might be. I'd be happy to do that and engage in further discussion because my goal is not to confuse the issue. It certainly was not to confuse the issue, but it's to bring attention to a real issue that people have debated for 1900 or so years now. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to go and ask Paul like some of his early followers might have done. So with that clarification, here's where I land. For years, like most people, I took the easy approach. I took the straightforward approach. I means I. I mean, that is just simple enough. But when we look at the passage more closely, we see problems with that understanding, such as Romans 7:9, which says that I died. Thus, I definitely see some truth in Paul relating with either Adam and or with Israel. On Tuesday, I mentioned Douglas Moo, who is one of the leading authorities on Romans today. He argues that there is a combination of Paul and Israel. It's not just Paul as I. It's not just Israel as I. There is a combination of the two of them. That covers all of the positives that are being used for both the I and for Israel. And some of that I touched on in the previous days. It provides a solution to the emotionally charged wording in Romans 7:24, where it would almost have to have been Paul, otherwise he's being theatrical, melodramatic, or who knows in that. And other highly regarded commentators have their own interpretation, and again, they have studied this more deeply. They know the Greek better than I ever will, and they know the Bible in general than I might. But I see it differently than those. I respect it. I take what they've given, but I see it a little bit differently. My thoughts are to add Adam with Paul and Israel using a bit of a progressive approach to this understanding of the I. The progression is as follows. In Romans 7, verses 7 through 12, Paul is largely referring to Adam. Again, that is not out of the bounds of normalcy. Many people, including the church fathers, if you go back to Tuesday's video, the early church fathers have that understanding of the I. Adam is the only person, as I mentioned Tuesday, who has ever lived outside of the law. Adam was created outside of the garden. He was brought into the garden. He was given a law. Eve was created, and then they broke the law together. It was, so Romans 7:9 fits Adam perfectly. It really can't fit anybody else at all. Maybe Eve, but it can't fit anybody else in all of history at all, at least from a literal perspective. Again, watch Tuesday's video on the figurative perspective. So all of Romans 7 through 11, could be Adam giving an autobiographical account of his time in the garden. And we also must understand that Paul begins the first reference in Romans to Adam, which begins this entire section that ends at the end of chapter 7. He mentions Adam. Romans 5:12 through 7:25, he's got some element of Adam working in between and back and forth throughout all of that. So that's the inclusion of Adam, Paul using Adam. In verses 13 through 25, I think he's talking more about Israel. He's taking on the persona of Israel. After receiving the law, Israel soon learned that it could not keep the law. As Romans 6 says, we are slaves to the law. Israel was a slave. The people of Israel were literally slaves to the Egyptians. They were a slave to the law even when they were freed from Egypt. They could not do what they wanted to do. Israel, as a corporate nation, a corporate body of people, could not do what it wanted to do. Israel did not do what it wanted to do, nor did it not do what it didn't want to do. Say that 5 times fast. This embodies Paul's life, and so here in these verses, I think it embodies Israel. Now, Paul, we must understand, was of Israel descent. He was from the tribe of Benjamin, one of the 12 tribes, as we see in Philippians 3:5. So it would make perfect sense that Paul, who came in the lineage of Adam, because all mankind comes from Adam, Paul, coming from the tribe of one of the tribes of Israel, used Adam in the first part of this, used Israel in the second part of this, and then in the last part, he brings that upon himself. In verse 24, at least, if not a little bit earlier, Paul is expressing the personal nature of himself, that wretched man who is tortured from not being free from this fleshly body, as he said in this. Now, I'm going to pause on more explanation on 13 through 25 because, again, that will be next week's daily videos. But here in Romans 7, verses 7 through 25, I see a combination of Paul as himself, as Paul with Adam in verses 7 through 12, as Paul with Israel, at least verses 13 through 20, if not through 23, all representing the word I. So Andy Brams, realized that explanation may be awkward. You may even think, well, you're just taking the easy way out. You're just taking the best of all and leaving aside some of the others. Actually, I'm incorporating the negatives and making an explanation, I think, by looking more deeply at the positives to come up with this particular solution. My solution, again, I'm not suggesting this is the solution, this is my solution, provides a reasonable combination not only of the concept of the I, but incorporating all of history, again, because Paul was from the lineage of Adam, as we all are, and he was from the lineage of Israel, and ultimately he is broken free from both by taking on the characteristics of Christ. Furthermore, we must understand that the Bible is filled with paradoxes. Jesus, as fully man and fully divine, 100 plus 100 does not equal 100, and yet with Jesus it does. The Trinity, fully Father, fully Son, fully Spirit, and yet the three as one, 3 and 1, just that doesn't mesh. So there are paradoxes in the Bible that we can't explain easily, and I think this is another type of paradox. It is a viable approach. My solution is a viable approach into making something a little bit more solid, even when it still seems squishy. So I hope this week has been helpful. I realize this is deep. I realize this is a deeper dive into this, but I hope this has brought a little bit of clarity of what the I could mean. I hope this has brought a little bit of an understanding as to what deep Bible study can really do for us, even when sometimes it makes it more difficult to understand in the short run. Next week, I'm going to take on an even more considerable debate in looking at Romans 7:13 through 25, and specifically the timing of this, of what Paul is, what Paul's reference is as it relates to doing what he doesn't want to do and not doing what he knows he should do. Then we will get to my favorite chapter in the Bible, in Romans chapter 8, beginning in February. Until next week, have a great weekend.